So why address the issue of homosexuality and same-sex marriage? Well, I think a lot of people were confused and thought that we were addressing this issue because of all of the outcry about our mayor, Anise Parker, here in Houston, and the subpoena of pastors and their sermons. Those things coincided with this conference that we did. We weren't at all responding to that. That was merely providential. We had decided to address this issue long before. And the reason that we had decided to address this issue in a conference on religion and politics is because this is arguably the most important political issue as well as moral issue of our day. This is the issue at the forefront of what it means for us to be Americans, what it means for us to be Christians, and what it means for us to be citizens as believers. Same-sex marriage is here. It's legal in a number of states, and it's going to be legal in even more states. Some are worried that eventually Christians will be persecuted because of this issue. What worries me is that Christians might not be persecuted over this issue. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, I'm afraid that same-sex marriage, if we don't address it and begin to think about it rightly, could become the government education of the next generation. You see, in the 1870s, when the idea of mandatory government education was introduced, Christians fought it tooth and nail. Because of their understanding of sphere sovereignty, they would not put their children in government schools. And for 50 years, the attitude was, we will fight against this. The government has no right, nor does it have a responsibility to educate our children, especially in a non-Christian environment. Well, 50 years later, they developed this sort of, if you can't beat them, join them mentality. And Christians began to put their children in these schools with a view toward the schools being Christianized. Now, if we look forward to our day, the overwhelming majority of Christians, somewhere between 85 and 90%, use the government schools. And people who are opposed to government education, Christians who are opposed to it, are in the extreme minority. I fear that if we don't open our eyes on this issue of same-sex marriage, then 50 years from now, it'll be the same. 50 years from now, people will be able to remember when most Christians opposed the idea. But at that time, we could see a landscape where the overwhelming majority of Christians really have little or no opposition to same-sex marriage, and in fact support it and try to be more Christian in the way that they approach it and embrace it. And those who speak out in opposition will be in such a minority that it really won't be worth persecuting us. There's a reason that I believe this. And in this series, you'll understand why. You'll understand this process that has happened over the last generation to transform the way we think about this issue of homosexuality and same-sex marriage. You'll understand why it is that we're defensive when it comes to this issue. You'll also understand how this link was made between homosexuality and ethnicity, the whole idea that gay is the new black. You'll understand that how that led to another step, which is the step that says, just like the church was wrong on issues like slavery, the church is wrong today on the issue of homosexuality. You hear things like, we don't want to be on the wrong side of history. Well, what I'm trying to do in this series of messages is not address everything that has to do with the issue of homosexuality and same-sex marriage. I just want to introduce you to the issue from the perspective of religion and politics. I want you to understand how we got here. I want you to understand what you need to be aware of. I want you to understand the strategies that have taken place up until this point and the strategies that will continue on beyond this point. And most importantly, I want you to understand what this has to do with the gospel. And I want you to understand how we can engage this issue in a gospel-centered manner. Because what people need is the gospel. They need Christ. This is not about getting good laws, although good laws are important. This is about people coming to know that Christ is their only hope, regardless of the sin with which they struggle. So as you look at these messages, Remember these things. There's a lot more to address on this topic, and there's no way that we could handle it all in the space of time that we had allotted to us. But this is important. It's foundational, and I think it's a good place for us to start.